The big question right now, everyone, is how will all these partnerships help in alleviating the poverty of 133 million Nigerians who we understand are living in multidimensional poverty, and how much succor will this bring to the economy? I'm joined by the Public Relations Officer of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, Nasima Adefeko, who was on the Nigerian delegation to the G20 summit in India. Mr. Adefeko, thank you for joining us on the program this hour. Let's begin with what you consider the big takeaways from Nigeria's participation in the G20 summit and sideline engagements where we saw Mr. President. Mr. Adefeko, I'm asking for the big takeaways for you from the G20 summit. You might have to unmute your mic. Mr. Adefeko, well, we'll get back to connecting with the Nasima PRO in the course of the program. The AU permanent membership status is also one of the big headlines at the summit. Mr. Adefeko, I was asking what you consider to be the big takeaways from the G20 summit, as well as the sideline events that Mr. President participated
in. Thank you very much. I could barely hear you, so struggling to hear you. Thank you very much. The 6th and 7th of September were, important moments in our history, the annals of Nigerian history. Economic diplomacy at its form. The President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was in India on the sidelines of the G20 summit. And we are having a meeting, organized private sector with the conclave of the Indian business community. So it was very good. Over $14 billion worth of investments are coming into Nigeria, the likes of Bharti, the likes of Skipper, the likes of the Chinese, Indian business, defense business in turn with DICOM. Okay, so defense industries of Nigeria. So that was in the area of about 1 billion. So there were lots of things that happened. A lot of things happening. I would say India, incredible India, is. But the key highlights for me was 1, Nigeria is open for business. 2, mindset change on the part of Nigeria. Africa's largest democracy against the backdrop of the world's largest democracy in India. Bilaterals on the sidelines of the G20, with which we were invited. And I think that's a major one. It shows the respect that the Indian government has for Nigeria. And for me, like I said, this is the economic diplomacy at its apogee, at its height, at its zenith. Pretty impressive. Investments are coming into Nigeria and vice versa. What was pretty impressive for me was the lean team the president of Nigeria went with. He went with 4 ministers. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, of course, because it's bilateral. The Minister of Finance, and of course, coordinating Minister of the Economy, Olawale Edu. The Minister of Digital Economic Communications, okay, Mosun Tijani, and the Minister of Trade and Investment, Dr. Anite. So it shows that he was very focused, very targeted. He knew what he wanted, and against the backdrop of that, that was what he went for. There were only two guys from the subnationals. You had the minister, you had the governor of Ogun State, Abiodun, and of course the governor of Kwara State, Razak Rahman. So tight on the government side, but very expansive on the business side, which shows you that government is open for cooperation between the private sector and the public sector, so which was very impressive.
All right. We'll talk about the economic impact and what is expected in Nigeria in the coming days. But quickly, let's touch on the permanent membership status for the African Union. What does that mean in terms of volume of trade and foreign direct investment into Africa, especially with the diplomatic tension between several countries around the world?
What this basically portends is that we have G20. So technically speaking, we'll be having G21 or probably G22 if Nigeria decides to join. The AU will have a representative, okay? But for me, I think it's important that we're talking about trade, we're talking about investment, we're talking about bilaterals. G20 is very powerful, and it's where the only African country in G20 for now is Africa's second largest economy. Don't forget, Nigeria is Africa's largest economy. So you have South Africa there for now. But of course, you heard the president speak to the fact that we are open to joining the G20. But for now, what we have is the AU coming in representing the continent. The same way you have the EU having a representative on it as well. So it's pretty impressive. A lot is going to happen in the area of trade. G20 is very powerful, very strategic, very multilateral, and very important in the scheme of things. So what is important for Nigeria, because I need to zero down to Nigeria, is that economic diplomacy is at the forefront of PBAT's agenda, which is very important and a very good elixir to drive economic growth.
I'm wondering if you foresee any direct impact that the AU permanent membership will have on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that is just taken off within the continent.
What you must understand is that African Free Trade Area is something that has come to stay. Okay, the EU had theirs at a point in time. Don't forget back in the days of the EEC, European Economic Community. So you have multiple blocks in Africa. You have the SADC, you have the ECOWAS, you have the UMOA, and all that. All that has been fused into 1.2 billion, 1.2 billion people. Okay, and over $150 billion market. Pretty impressive for Africa. But for me, what is important here is the nexus between Africa, Asia, Middle East, Latin America, and the Americas, as well as Europe. That's what that brings forth. So G20 is an amalgam of everybody. India is there, Brazil is there, China is there. So what you have there is the 20 top economies of the world, as it were. And regional blocks and regional parties coming to play in that block will be something that will be very, very, very significant and very impressive for the overall growth of the global economy. What you must understand is that no man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent.
A lot have also been said about some of the juicy deals the president was able to strike with major investors in India. There is the $14 billion investment pipeline that is secured during the presidential roundtable with Indian investors. How do we ensure these kinds of agreements are effectively executed?
What you must understand first and foremost is that there's a clear mindset from the presidency that, you know what we want is private sector to thrive. Government is, whether you like it or not, we must be frank with ourselves, government is quasi-broke, okay? So what government wants to encourage, what you call public-private partnership and private sector involvement in running the economy. The private sector is the engine room of the economy. What has happened is that the likes of Bharti, the likes of Skipper, the likes of Indorama, already have investments in Nigeria. All they want to do is to increase the level of investment they have in Nigeria to a level in which we've not seen before. So $14 billion coming into this economy right now will reflate the economy to a very large extent. And you know what? It is very important for us to have that. So we have bilaterals on the one hand between us and India, but don't forget that on the sidelines as well, the president met post the meeting with the Indian private sector, met with the German chancellor, met with the Prime Minister of India,
Indeed.
Met with the president of South Korea. So these are important meetings that are signaling that Nigeria is open for business. Take the marker away, Nigeria is open for business. Those are the words of the president. Nigeria is open for business.
So
this is an era of what you call diplomacy.
From India to South Korea, like you mentioned, the US,
yes.
Germany, and even lately we're hearing from the UAE. It's been some news of promising investment in the country. Finally, what should Nigeria be doing differently now to create an enabling environment that can take full advantage of this potential investment?
What is very important for Nigeria to create right now is what you call fiscal and monetary policy reforms. Okay? What we've had before now is what you call monetary and fiscal policy misalignment. what we need right now is an alignment on the fiscal front and on the monetary front, policy and diplomacy.
We're counting on that, and we're also looking forward to it too as well, Mr. Adefeko. That's our time. Ade Adefeko is the Public Relations Officer of NACIMA, the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, and it was on the Nigerian delegation to the G20 summit in India. Thank you for talking to us on the program this evening.
Thank you for having me.